It seems crazy, doesn't it? There are huge Christian networks and organizations that seem to do everything with pure faith, love, and forgiveness. But have you ever thought about what might happen if that isn't the whole story? In fact, what if the principles they're trying to teach everyone don't really matter? We have to face some possibly uncomfortable truths about how power works, which makes it hard. For instance, when a group says it was formed on these basic biblical principles but is then accused of doing things that seem to go against those lessons, it makes you think a lot about responsibility, truth, and rightness. Certain places like faith groups, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We have this story from someone who used to work at Dayar, and I have to say that it paints a pretty scary picture. It's not just, oh, a grumpy ex-employee. This story goes deeper. It says that Joni Lamb and her mother planned a pattern of abuse, and it shows what the source calls a rot beneath the surface. Organization's perfect Christian image. So our goal in this in-depth study today is to break these charges down completely so you can understand what is being said and what the bigger effects might be. It is important to remember that they were focusing on this one story to understand the claims because it describes these specific events and, if true, a bigger pattern of behavior that would point to a pretty big difference between how Dayar is seen by the world and what this person says is true about him. Let's begin with the beginning. This former worker who used to be a pretty high-level manager at Dayar says they were fired for reporting some claimed wrongdoing. What's really horrifying is that this story says they were punished in more ways than just losing their job. Wow, this story talks about there is information about a planned campaign of public humiliation, and one example shows this clearly for anyone trying to understand the supposed atmosphere. Take this supposed meeting at a cosmetics store as an example. It's interesting that this was done in public instead of in private or as a quiet warning or talk. Visual treat, it looks like the goal was to hurt this person's feelings as much as possible. Please tell me more about it. There is a story about Joanie Lamb and her mother running into a former worker who is now doing a temporary job at a makeup station. Instead of just recognizing them or something, they supposedly made sure to everyone nearby, they told everyone how they felt about the whole thing. The situation of this person, she used to be the head of marketing at Dayar before this, and the story shows that the teasing laughter that followed wasn't a mistake, it was part of a performance meant to send a sharp message about what happens when you cross them. The public part is very important, so if this is in fact, it suggests that they don't just deal with lying behind closed doors, they actively punish it in public. When someone acts in this way, it can have an ongoing effect on their mental health and send a very clear message to anyone else who might be thinking about standing up. Oh yes, there is a cooling effect for sure. According to the source, this wasn't just one event, it shows a widespread trend of anyone who tried to question power or reveal any wrongdoing in the company would be punished. Not only did they get fired, but they were also shamed in public. What I find most shocking about this story is the wide range of actions they are said to take to silence criticism, including cases where people were stripped of their roles and duties, they were made useless and then given low-level jobs. As an example, the source says that someone had to clean the bathrooms. What a waste of time and energy this is. It's all about ruining someone's personality and sense of worth. It's pretty bad. To really get a feel for the mood, the report talks about these mocking incidents, even though they happened in staff meetings. Meetings, yes, leaders publicly make fun of people who have raised concerns in the past by using sarcastic and insulting language. Demotions also happen, where people are put in jobs that have nothing to do with their skills or abilities in order to put them down. Indeed, in the organization's public space, it seems like they wanted to make sure everyone knew their part and that the goal was to make anyone who spoke out look bad. To fully create a culture of fear, they need to protect their reputation and make sure that no one else thinks about doing the same. Yes, when people question authority, big things happen for the public. Indeed, but the story suggests that the revenge continues through what are called whispered smear campaigns, even after an employee quits, which is pretty scary. There are even more worries and, to be honest, scary things to come. An important claim is that Dayar, with its large network in Christian media, uses it to blacklist people who left on bad terms, making it hard for them to find work. The idea behind these smear campaigns is that a company would consciously try to hurt the image of former workers. In fact, the account mostly talks about specific stories in the same industry, like that the former workers are unstable, dishonest, or have moral flaws. You can only picture how bad that is, especially in those settings where someone might never get hired again because of it. It hurts their image, which leaves them alone professionally and socially for a long time. It also shows a system where it's possible for what you say to affect people long after you leave, and it gets worse. This statement goes into depth about what is called organized harassment that takes place outside of work. Wow, this is when it starts to feel like a mental health problem. I'm totally captivated by the claims of being watched, having these fake meetings, and even getting things that could be seen as threats. Yes, the story talks about a past worker who kept seeing the same car which they didn't recognize and later found out that it belonged to a Dayar employee. Because of this, they were being tailed over and over while parking close to their house, which is scary. Yes, there are also situations where people are said to have fought in public, like the time someone was violently attacked by a former friend in a store. Things that happen seem to be done to scare him and get him to react so that he looks bad and maybe makes a scene. Even worse, the story says that former coworkers would say things that made it sound like these people were still being watched or tracked in some way, like Big Brother was always watching. The constant pressure can make you feel very unsafe and like your privacy has been invaded, and there is also the danger. Even though it's bad, the phone calls and suggestions to just keep going give the idea that it's very well controlled. The next part of the story is about the mental and spiritual damage this does to people who have been through it, since this is an organization that teaches love and forgiveness. It's like psychological warfare meant to totally silence dissent. The difference between what they said they did and what they did becomes very clear. Absolutely, it must be terrible to work hard at a place that says it was built on Christian values and then be treated this way when you try to uphold those values. Yes, the story does talk about how they tried to make sense of what they believed and what they had experienced. It also talks about how betrayed and alone they felt. The story of this isn't just about one person, right? When a ministry with this much power is accused of acting in this way, it makes the whole church and system look bad. If this is true, then there is a big difference between what they say and what they do, which brings us to our last point. It's like having a crisis of faith, and it makes us think of the cosmetics case, the scars that will last, and the deception. Being responsible. At the end of the story, there is the question, will Dayar be held responsible for these alleged actions, or will this culture continue? It's a big question, especially since faith-based groups don't always have the same amount of oversight as businesses. But the moral and social issues are important, and there is a real chance that people and the community will be hurt. Claiming to be embarrassed in public, there's a pattern of putting down dissent, taking away duties, putting down tasks, making fun of emotions, and trying to ruin reputations through whisper campaigns, blacklisting people, and organized harassment after people confront them with threats, after trying to expose wrongdoing, like that terrible incident at the cosmetics counter. It's all about being in charge, and using fear to control someone is very bad for their mental and spiritual health. They feel alone and lied to, and their faith is shaken. People and the community as a whole want to know what to do when these kinds of claims come up. How can we keep those who speak out safe? How can we make people really responsible? These questions go beyond Dayar. They talk about how faith groups affect people's lives and how trust, openness, and honesty work in them. Thanks for taking the time to join this in-depth conversation. Remember to always seek the truth, ask questions, and think critically. See you next time.